The story of Arcane Zero. A robed, hooded monster views two different lives unfolding. Human-like people on a planet, and a creature growing in a fantastical universe. The Silent One, draped and concealed in monk's robes, this hooded humanoid creature watches. He observes unique events and discovers special beings and their timelines, manipulating them for his own mysterious goals. In an artificial reality, in some soundless, lightless universe created for observing, he does just that. Intensely does this small, human-like figure stare deeply at the only other thing manifested in this reality, a window. This window is a portal to view the endless existences. In this new level of reality that has been added to existence by him, he can view the unfolding of events everywhere. Peering into that floating frame of other worlds, into that reality from another, an anthropoid woman is desecrated by a monster. A profane beast not belonging to that planet, not of that universe, assaults and violates a human-like native. Surrounded in infinite emptiness and blackness, gazing intently, the hooded, robed figure sees something during the assault. Witnessing from that silent, blank, and barren level an irregular, unorthodox conception. Observing, as safely as being the only thing in existence, this improbable event, entirely focused on this unlikely possibility. In blazing orange, the sun sets on the village. Sounds of happy children fill the evening with playful chaos as they weave around the semi-movable huts in an energetic game reminiscent of tag. There was never signs of being other than normal, average child for Arcane, the progeny of that event. Arcane lives his last day of childhood running and playing with the boys and girls, children he will remember fondly, and they him. Across Arcane's young, fresh face strobes the last precious light as he dashes past huts that now intermittently block the sun-setting horizon. The years have passed easily, but an ominousness grows along with the prolonged, dark night that approaches. Opening another framework, the Silent One parting and structuring an opening to view that reality like a surgical retractor parting fabrics of space-time, realities as if they were layers of skin, muscle, and organs. Far away, in deep dimension, a sunken, unstirred level, there lives one being for an entire universe. All to itself a single plane of existence, at absolute zero temperature but still functioning much like a typical universe, only much calmer and slower and quieter, at a low-level energy state. Evolving in an unfathomable dimension, a single molecule bonded and grew. It was the closest thing to organic that universe was ever going to see. For eons it was growing, consuming what it needs to survive, changing and adapting to new things, responsive and reactionary like lifeless flesh, if one could call it flesh. It grew until one day a spark of life appeared, a faint energy, a budding consciousness. Awareness grew as the flesh grew, proportional, as its body made its way from the micro world to the macro. Continuing for eons like this, a small consciousness became expansive and self-aware and would eventually be called a zero monster. After some festivities, a communal dinner, evening games, the children worn out, families shrink back into the huts for a cozy fire and a well-rest. Traditions maintained, young men sneak out for the night hunt. Pride and honor await the young men who can slay the colossal animal that has killed many good young men before. With only flint knives and spears in hand, the boys, including Arcane, set out. Finally, on equal visual footing from the lengthy, lightless night, the boys and the prey are equally blinded by the blackness, but the boys have trained. Deprivation has made necessitation. A world of unfamiliar darkness begets a world of trained senses. Creeping through a jungle darkly, the boys have grown up in this environment, evolved in it, and have been trained to hunt in it. In these long, dark, dangerous nights, the jungle still has the advantage, but unlike their prey, they can train themselves. Unlike their prey, they can learn to be braver, smarter, and ruthless. Back in the fantastical universe with exotic atoms and an unworldly flesh that oozed up from the molecular world discovers its own body. It has gone through different stages of size and their emergent levels and properties, from a world where air and water is as thick as honey to one where that resistance no longer exists. Zero is about to realize there is much physical freedom in the macro world. This formless, thick substance which has sprouted like a fungus into the larger world begins to move. It has enough size to manipulate itself and material to push itself with. It starts with ripples across the surface, then tiny fingers, then giant flailing limbs, but all the while still stationary. Stretching like a slug or snail and contracting its muscleless substance, it takes its first steps. The hunt went well for Arcane and the boys, who get back to the village and split up to go back to their families' huts. Some wake their parents to tell of their tale, others to collapse asleep. Arcane walks alone back home. Unlike the others, his mother wasn't able to have any more children after him. Getting to the front door, Arcane drops his sack and wraps of meat to enter. Creeping quietly so as not to wake his parents, his eyes slowly adjust to the gentle fire that welcomes him. Sounds and smells and warmth of home strikes as he enters. But new things lie in wait. Blood splatters, a female arm torn from its body, father's decapitated head sitting on its neck, watching the scene. Arcane's eyes slowly adjust to the firelight. In another world, a mass of evolved molecular flesh harboring a consciousness propels itself over crystalline rock formations. Having no organs, no eyes, no mouth, only vibratory senses, and willing itself to move the superconductive, superfluid bodily material by the freely floating electrical consciousness inside. In the passing tranquil eons, Zero's senses have become so sensitive as to detect its whole universe. It grew so large and so aware of itself and its surroundings, having a micro and macro sensory as to detect the spinning of subatomic particles. The low energy quietness as Zero grew caused it to experience an entire plane of existence. Zero became so aware because of that still and isolated level of reality. Zero bathed in the quantum calm, the subatomic serene. Unaware of the realities, the dangers lurking outside his level, outside his placid plane, far severed from the bulge of existence. Arcane's eyes adjusted, blood now clearly visible and glistening off the firelight everywhere, a red ocean over the floors. Arcane's father's eyes stare at him from the corner, toward Arcane lurking at the entrance, thrown after the decapitation. There's a strange iridescent glittering off the blood and walls. All the smells achieve realization of slaughter, of butchery, the aroma of the inside of things turned out. There is a naked, hairless man in the middle of the main room. The man's skin glows from the inside like a paper lantern, shining lights all over the interior, twinkling in the father's eyes from the corner. The translucent-skinned man lumbers over the dead mother, glimmering over her broken, abused body. There are moments when space-time warps around the man and Arcane's mother, with colored orbs flying out of some dimension and disappearing. Standing behind, With the man's back turned to him, Arcane grips his knife tight, as pulsating colors burst from deep inside the man's body. With knife in hand, bioluminescence be damned, he stabbed the knife through the man's throat and cut. Arcane didn't stop cutting until the man was decapitated and in pieces like his father. A blood-covered Arcane looks over the scene, still clenching his knife. A small movement and fleshy sound gets his attention. Peering back at him from inside a skinned, half-crushed skull is the moving eye of the murderer, rapist, and soul stealer. One intact eye flickers back and forth, looking at Arcane. Briefly, the intruder's eye, as if a last dying breath, burns bright, briefly illuminating the room and making Arcane's flesh luminescent. Arcane regains his composure and rams his knife, handle deep, into the wriggling, terrified, last remaining eye. Setting fire to the hut, he takes his time to watch everything burn, taking it all in. As he watches the blazing sight, he ponders his life. The Silent One ponders him, and watching as he knows it's time to meet. Burning behind him was his family's hut with his family inside. The cracking of fire, the burning smell of flesh, a strange absence of other people except one. In front of Arcane is the short-statured creature, draped in monk's robes. Without a sound or movement, and instantaneously, Arcane was in some type of holding cell, with the Silent One on the other side of a clear partition. Arcane's body begins to warp in ripples, his body twisting in space and time. Bones crunch and snap, tendons tear, and deep, bloody cuts fissure all over his body. Wounds open and close by the distorted reality from the stretching of dimensional time and space of his body. The Silent One had to intervene to save Arcane's life more than once. When he did, Arcane could see the scars and feel the pain, while also seeing the years add up. He was growing into a man. His broken body swelled with pain and new power, a power that eventually helped his body gorge on the new meta-stimulus. What came out the other side was a giant of muscles and scars with one red, cloudy eye. Aware energy floats free through the absolute zero flesh. It is an oddity in a world of oddities. Zero's electrical energy mind moves, travels inside the giant mass of material without resistance. Consciousness wills the flesh. The zero-state molecule moves with no loss of kinetic energy. Tranquil eons pass when an oval egg-like pod drops, splitting from Arcane and commencing a lineage. Here and there in the countless eons that followed, a few more zero creatures were parted and begotten. They would develop games to play like twins, all enjoying each other's company, exploring their worlds. The original discovered the possibility of others. The others had an origin. One day they were visited. They knew immediately. They all sensed the intruders, down to their very atoms. The vibrations of some new thing entering their reality was deafening to their senses. The stillness, the tranquility, the peace was forever broken. Life outside had bored a permanent hole into their world. Exploration, imperialism, conquest led to alien armies and warriors from everywhere wanting to test themselves on the zero creatures, while scientists tested unimaginable weapons. The Zeros wanted to live in peace, to shield themselves from all other existences, to protect themselves from the constant echoing and vibration of the creatures that entered and the other realities that bombarded their senses through the new hole. Nothing ever physical hurt them. The Zero creatures seemed impervious to everything the outside world could muster, but that hole set their senses ablaze. It was maddening. Once discovered, and the multiplicity of time, space, and reality reacting to the newly acquired continuity and knowledge, the Silent One was soon to follow. The hooded figure renditioned every zero creature away to only where he knows. Unknown to anyone, a single pod, nestled in a cavern, born recently, was unfound and unknown. The baby zero creature would grow up and take the brunt of all those civilizations, soldiers, and weaponry, relentlessly alone. They did not stop. They did not care. They tormented and taunted the creature almost to the point of madness. Monstrous animals and monstrous technology in an even more monstrous society always made their way through that hole. The last known zero knows nothing of what came before him or what begat him. Only constant pain and the bombardment of senses, and a life of exotic battles and strange creatures that hunt him, is what it knows. Zero eventually left his realm, learning that they always know where to find him. He was able to explore levels of existence, rare realities, dangerous dimensions, whole universes of new physics, ineffable environments, and monsters like itself. With impunity he explored, but never found real silence. Zero discovered these places where creatures would bury their dead. Those remnants of past lives, somehow nestled among their decaying corpse, quieted the constant vibrations of the ceaseless existence all around. Arcane awoke naked, set free in a forest that looked a lot like the one he grew up in. Grown in size and stature, enormous scars on top, and even bigger muscles below, and a glowing red eye. Dropped into a war-torn countryside to fend for himself, he was quickly conscripted into a local battalion of a large army. New soldiering scars grew with every battle, every fight. Stabbing and hacking was his and everyone's entire life. Although Arcane was now a giant of a man, he still bled, had organs, needed rest and food, and was in general vulnerable. Friendship always grows among soldiers, and he was no exception. In the beginning, budding friendships were wiped out. Years marched, and things changed, with a turn in the war. Arcane bonded over blood. As the conquest expanded, so did his circle of friends. Years slowly went by with the slow, marching haze of never-ending war. He was eventually allowed to form his own regiment. He was eventually known everywhere, along with his band of men. They had become legendary. But nothing lasts. Flanked from all sides, boxed in, and comrades lying in pieces, his friends all dead, Arcane the last one standing. It's a cold morning, and he can see his breath. Looking up at the blue sky, he wonders if the Silent One is watching. He is. Enemies close in. His size and strength is nothing against an entire 10,000-man army. Swinging and hacking his way through, they whittle his body away. Chunks here, a piece there, until he was no longer able to stand. Collapsed on the ground, they encircle him, spit on him, stomping on his face, leading to a frenzy of hacking and dismembering. Arcane's blood oozing out onto the battlefield from his many severed body parts. A stillness comes over the battle scene. Blue electrical sparks flash from Arcane's blood. The clouds whirl around in the sky directly above his body. A giant blue bolt of lightning flashes, and a shock wave ripples out. Blinded, the men turn, shielding their eyes. Looking back, they see a towering mushroom cloud, crackling with blue static, outlining a behemoth, Stretching his Cthulhu-like limbs from the smoke, the Zero creature now stands before them. Zero is seen for miles, causing a stampede, trampling each other, fleeing in horror. Tens of thousands of people flee in any and all possible directions. Inside the beast, Arcane is panicking. Zero's consciousness is nowhere to be found, only Arcane's mind, his awareness now drifting freely inside. Disembodied, floating through the giant lumbering beast, he slowly begins to sense things, to experience in a new way, a new sight of the outside world. Arcane's senses are not overloaded like that of Zero's with the vibrations of existence. Arcane was insensitive to whatever it was that drove Zero's senses mad. On the contrary, there was a peacefulness, a great stillness existing in that body for Arcane. That emotional tranquility was broken as he looks down on the fleeing army, sensing every movement. He naturally outstretches an arm, wills what would be a limb, and the shapeless takes form. A titanic tentacle appendage reaches up and smashes down, thousands dead. Up and down again in another direction, thousands more dead. He did that until nothing moved for miles. The story of Arcane Zero.